Good morning, everyone.
Hey, guten Morgen. I'm so excited. So many people made it 9 a.m. on the dot. There's a few people coming in, but it's amazing to see you after the party. I hope you enjoyed the party last night. I'm excited to be here. TC back in Berlin, back on my home turf, so to speak, and I'm excited. Last time we said big data really needs a grand space, and I think this year we actually got it. I'm very excited. Can't get much bigger than this, right?
No.
And with me today is the just as grand Erwin van Laar. What are we in for today?
So today's session is hot, hotter, hyper. Let's talk a little bit about what this session is and what it isn't. So hopefully you've all seen this slide. It's an exact screenshot from TC Europe's website. And today's session is all about how, if you have a data lake or if you have massive amounts of data, you really want to get value out of it. And usually when you start connecting directly to the data lake and just fire a query at it, you're basically querying a storage a service. So basically, the main goal of today's session is how are you going to be able to visualize big data and really get those insights out of it. One of the ways in which we can do that is by, of course, using Tableau, but also using some of our features and technology within the product. And of course, one of those is Hyper. We'll touch on it a little bit of what it is, but more importantly, how you can use it and leverage it in big data strategies. Moreover, today's session has been listed as an intermediate session, meaning that we do assume some working knowledge of Tableau and some of the big data technologies that might be out there, but it should be an accessible session for everyone, whether you're a database administrator and really want to know about these data strategies, or an analyst and want to know more of how you can slot all of those particular different data sources together. All of TC Berlin sessions are recorded, so take photos and notes and everything you want, but I can feel or smell some people still have some alcohol in their blood, so if you just want to sit down, relax and watch, that's of course fine as well, and all the materials will be sent to you after TC anyway. We have quite a bit of content though, so we also ask you to hold questions until the end, and then we'll promise that we'll leave plenty of time for you to ask those questions as well. But as I already said, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us here at Hot, Hotter, Hyper. Or actually, how to handle big data and how Tableau and Hyper can assist you in that journey. But before we get into the bulk of the presentation, it might be good to introduce ourselves first a little bit.
Let's do that. If my clicker works.
There it is.
There you go. All right, so I'm Marius. I'm solution consultant from Tableau based in London, but originally, if you haven't spotted that already, I'm from Germany, from Frankfurt, and I got my data education, let's say, in Germany. I used to work for E.ON, one of the biggest energy companies in Europe, and they naturally work with very, very large data sets, and I used to work at big data projects there, and now at Tableau, I'm always excited to work with customers to get the most out of their big data deployments and make them successful with big data. And with me is Erwin.
Yeah, so my name is Erwin van Laar. I am a product consultant as well at Tableau, also based in London. Besides that, I also manage our team of product consultants that look after Tableau's NEMEA region, which to us is the Benelux, the Nordics, Middle East, and Africa. So you might have seen me or my team somewhere else or during conference here today. My background's actually not in data, it's in healthcare. I used to be a policy manager at an occupational health service in Holland. But it wasn't until I actually started using Tableau as a customer that I saw the value of it. And then a Dutch-speaking role opened up in London, got on a plane, and been at Tableau about 2.5 years now. I'm having a whole lot of fun, and we're super happy to bring this session, which we originated for New Orleans, back to our continent.
Amazing. So what are we talking today? What's the main topic? The main topic is the big data ecosystem as a whole, and particularly getting value out of your big data investments. Because a lot of our customers invested a hell lot of money into big data systems and the whole environment around it. And the main use case, the main reason for this is usually data mining, data science use cases, machine learning, AI, that comes up more and more, and that's great, and that's exactly what it's built for, but we want to show you how you can get even more value out of those systems, because we at Tableau believe that data should be for everyone, and everyone can get value out of the data, and therefore we should make it accessible for everyone. So that's going to be the focus, the people. We want to create content with the data that anyone can use. So we invested so much into those systems, why not give that data to everyone in a way they can consume it and get value out of it. To get us started, let me show you how this can look like. So as an analyst, I might start here from scratch with a blank slate. And I'm connected live to a Hadoop cluster, one of the big data technologies. And as an analyst, I want to connect to the data and jump right in, right? So let's do that. I have some baseball data over here. Let's have a look at all the home runs, just drag and drop, right? You did that, and I've seen that a lot of times here at the conference. And then we get the pop-up that no one wants to see, right? Executing query, what is Tableau doing? How long does it take? When can I start analyzing my data? So we have to wait, there's a delay, and now we have the result, right? And that's too long. Especially in this day and age, we want to have snappy, instant response times. And this is not even big data right now, right? So this is just over 100,000 rows of data. It's connected to a big data system, but we're actually not using it for the right use case in this case. So we want to show you today what can we do to make that data fast, snappy, and how do we create content that is for anyone to be consumed. So we start with a typical big data lake environment. The data would be sitting in Hadoop, S3, wherever you want to store your data, right? And that's the playground then for the data scientists to feed their data-greedy algorithms and programs. And they're going to create a lot of value for the business doing that, and it's amazing. But there's quite a big gap between then the analysts who might not be able to use those systems and are not able to connect to those, and then especially for the business users. They won't have any idea what sort of data is in the data lake, right? They need a different way to access that. So Tableau helps people to see and understand data. We are a mission-driven company. We want to make people and organizations become more data-driven, and that's an important part, right? Making use of all the data we have in the organization and letting anyone use that data. A customer of ours who did a really good job doing that is Uniper in this. They are energy trading house, and they used to have that issue that daily trading reports took over a day to be produced by the IT team. So they had the goal to give that data, large data sets from their data lake, to anyone in the business, to their traders who actually were consuming the reports. So they had, what did they do? They gave 600 users access to Tableau, connecting to that data lake. That then cut the time to insight by 70%, and they already had at least 1 million of savings by doing that. But the most important part is that the user experience is much better, right? The actual traders who need the data, they're able to go back to the reports and create their own tailored content. So how do we achieve this? We want to tap in wherever your data sits, whatever kind of data it is, and then create engaging content with Tableau on top.
So how do we then do this, right? Well, today's session is split up into 3 main parts. First, we'll look a little bit at Tableau's big data focus and all the innovations that Tableau's been bringing out related to the big data field for the last 5-6 years. We'll then start talking about Hyper, as I already said. It's that in-memory, our new extract type, and it's going to help us in that journey. So we'll touch upon that a little bit as well. And then lastly, we're going to be talking about the big data framework, really thinking about what use cases your end users are asking for and which services and which data layers to use at any particular time. Now, we've already seen, of course, a few terminology when it comes to big data technologies flying around with Hadoop and S3 and Athena and Hive and those sorts of things. And we really want to ask you during today's session to not think of the specific services that we happen to use in our demo. There are loads of services out there, and I'm sure that everyone has their own combination of which. So during sort of those sessions, really think about the services and the data types and data warehouses that you have available to you and how you can leverage some of the principles. And I get stuck up sort of on the technologies that we happen to use. But that's enough for sort of agenda. Of course, we'll close off with a summary and then the time for Q&A. But with that, on to our first main block, which is Tableau's big data focus.
Yes, and that's not just our focus. We're very driven by our customers, what customers need and want. So in terms of big data, they tell us about three main pillars. So one is connectivity. Of course, I need to be able to connect to all my data, wherever it sits. That's why we invest a lot into our native connectors. The performance, as we've seen earlier, has to be fast. Otherwise, it's not fun to play with the data, to analyze the data. And the data discovery part as well. I need to find the right data set. We saw a great announcement yesterday, right, with data cataloging. That will help there a lot. Finding the right data set, know where it's coming from, and trusting that data too. And a key pillar to achieve this is the hybrid data strategy in Tableau. So you have the choice. Do you want to connect live to a database? Is it very high performant, and do I want to leverage this? Or do I maybe want to bring that into Tableau data extract, into Hyper? But however you choose to connect, it's still a unified user experience for everyone, right? The interface doesn't change. You can do the same things. To just drill down into each of these, so with the Live Query Engine, you can connect to the largest databases attached directly to your enterprise databases that you have internally or on premises or on the cloud, and you really make use of those investments. And with the in-memory engine, you can pull that data into an optimized format that is built for fast analytical queries. And you can pull that data from your database where you want to improve that performance. And that's, of course, Hyper, right? Since last year, that's Hyper, a great technology made in Germany. Let's hear more about that.
Yeah, it's always nice that you present with the German, and then the first thing they mention about it is not it's cool technology, but it's German. Yeah, but then the Dutch guy will talk about it. So Hyper. Hyper we released back in version 10.5, which is almost a year and a half ago now, and it replaced Tableau data extracts, though that in-memory data type file that we had. And it sort of revolutionized and sort of like gave us a new way how we execute or parallelly execute queries, meaning that you not only see faster query results, but also a lot faster query creation, or sorry, extract creation. So your extracts are faster, but they're also being created quicker, and it's all down to the scalability and the design of Hyper. Now, as I said, we won't go into too deep detail because we want to talk about that big data framework, but basically what Hyper does, it utilizes modern hardware technology optimally. By sending out parallel queries to all the available RAM that's on your system, it means that we can execute those queries actually really fast. That means that Hyper can actually just utilize large amounts of cores that might sit within your infrastructure. Now, of course, Hyper is, of course, nice and hungry, and it really wants to perform. So actually, just recently, we can now run Hyper on standalone nodes within your server environment, really making sure that you sort of specify a particular amount of hardware for Hyper, and making sure that that sort of Extract and Hyper don't fight for resources with all the other services on server. Really allowing you to tune how much hardware you're going to throw at Hyper to sort of run your extract creation and run those queries, giving you more flexibility on how performant you want that to be. Now, some of the key benefits that we see, and these are actually just real customer numbers, are of course that people can experience up to 5 times faster query performance with large and complex data sets. Hyper is really optimized for large extracts of hundreds of millions of rows. But you also get fresher data, right? I mean, faster extract creation also means that you can actually refresh that more often if you want as well. And of course, Hyper in itself, by design, supports much larger data extracts than the old Tableau data extract file type used to support.
But
here comes the German message, by the way. Listen carefully to this one.
But, of course, it's not the I win my data strategy button. It's not how we should do all of our analysis, right? And just pulling it all into Hyper. It would be an easy solution, but it's a bit more complex than that, right? We really have to think about a data strategy that makes sense to what you have in your organization and what kind of use cases you have, how people want to use that data. So we really encourage you to think about a data strategy from start to end. So aligning the technologies you have, the data you have, with the actual questions people are asking, actual use cases. That's what we see as very successful. One of our biggest customers, Netflix, they did a really good job outlining and actually sharing as well their core data strategy. So Netflix is a poster child of big data, right? They were born in the cloud and the data is streaming in. I think we have a lot of Netflix customers probably here in the crowd.
Guilty.
And they have over 100 million customers, and they store every click that is done on their website or the app, and they want to understand how people are using their content, their website and app. And that data is then streamed into their big data lake, which is Amazon S3 in this case. That's the central storage solution. And from there, they decide, depending on the use case, where they want to use that data and which way people should interact with it. So data scientists maybe run some machine learning workloads more on the data processors. They run that on Hadoop directly or Spark or Presto, and then visualize that either in Tableau, or they have other in-house options as well, or open source ways to do that, depending on how they want to share that data. Or they might choose for the analysts, for the business users, to bring that data into a fast storage solution, into something like Teradata, Redshift, but as well Tableau data extracts, to then use it for ad hoc analysis or business-driven dashboards. And what really helps here is thinking about that big data framework, hot, warm, cold. It's around for a while, but it's still very relevant. So we start in the bottom layer, in the code level, where we have the data in our raws format, right? That's where we store any of our data, which we might need at some point, might get value out of it at some point. And then when we see value in the data, we move it up further into higher levels, into the warm layer, where it's then a bit faster, a bit more aggregated usually, and then the hot layer, where it's in a fast database, further aggregated. So we see the data size typically goes down if you go further up, and the performance increases as well. So hot being the fastest. If we want to align technologies to this now, we would see things like Hadoop more on the cold, definitely more on the cold layer, creeping into the warm. So you have certain Hadoop accelerators that you can use, other query frameworks that will increase the performance there. So it's creeping into the warm, and it's getting fast as well. Typically, you would see your relational database here, and then in the hot, you have your analytical database, your Exasolts, and SAP HANA maybe as well, and then the Tableau data extract, so Hyper, would be on that level as well. So if we come back to our strategy, as an example, how could have Netflix aligned that framework to their technologies that they're using? So we have Hadoop and Hive. That's certainly in the cold area. That's for more batch workloads where the performance is not key. Then to speed that up, they might use something like Presto. And then you have the hot, the fast storage tier with Redshift, Teradata, and Tableau.
So then the question becomes, how do we translate this into a business strategy? What does cold, warm, and hot even mean? Now, they usually tend to relate to services and sort of use cases that these technologies are built for, which means that we start with that data lake, and that's where you store information. You then want to make sure that that's available to analyze, maybe for analysts or something else, but when we then want to make it ready to go into the organization, it really needs to be sped up to have those snappy, interactive dashboards. And not just sort of the speed at which those dashboards render, but also the way in which people consume information. Now, all these building blocks have already been set up with us during sort of the presentation so far, because we start off with that data lake, whatever technology you're using, you then leverage Tableau's hybrid data strategy to play with those analyze and those sort of that warm and those hot layers, which will then result into quick, fast, interactive, iterative dashboards ready for consumption and a lot of insights being derived from it. Now, let's just build one of these dashboards out, right? Let's just build that strategy. Now, I'm not sure about you, but I think a lot of people maybe took a plane to get here, or at least we've seen a plane at one point in our lives. So we're going to look at a data set, or we have a data set with us, which looks at all of the US's domestic flights for the last 30 years. They contain information about whether they were canceled or not, their actual departure time, their planned departure time, same on arrival, and of course the destination and the origin airport. And 30 years is a lot of data. We're talking like a lot of files here, a lot of it sort of ready to be analyzed, but Americans love flying, so there's going to be a lot of stuff in there. So let's just sort of see, if we look at this data set with over 200 or 300 million rows, how can we build up a strategy that actually produces a snappy dashboard?
So we have that data, and just as Netflix, the first step is to store that data somewhere where we can access it. So that would be our cold level, the storage layer. And that could be, Netflix is using Amazon S3, but it could be Hadoop as well. It's really just a cheap storage option. And from there on, we move our way up through those levels that Erwin mentioned. We want to analyze that data, right? So the data scientists, they are able to connect directly to that cloud storage and use it for their machine learning algorithms, but for the analysts and business users, it's a bit further away, right? So how do we bridge that gap now? Because currently we're just using 15% roughly of the value. Data scientists are producing a lot of value, but we could increase the productivity so much more by sharing the data with everyone. So let's have a look at the data. What is the data lake essentially, we are looking at, in this case, CSV files that are stored somewhere, right? In Hadoop or S3, so it's redundant. We make sure that we don't lose the data, but it's not that easy to analyze the data and consume. So you could use Hive, but as we've seen before, the performance is not good enough. We want to have snappy performance for our interactive dashboards and analytics. So let's move straight into that warm layer. How do we speed that up? So one way to do it is you leave the data where it is in the storage layer, and you just change the way how you query it, right? So with S3, there could be something like Amazon Athena. Cloudera gives you Impala as a query framework, and Hortonworks, you might want to use Hive LLAP, like a accelerator for Hive, essentially. And what's very important as well, think about how you store those files, right? So in our case, we had CSV files. They're not incredibly optimized for queries, right? That's not the main use case. So there are better file formats for that, like Parquet, ORC, that can make things much faster there, because you're actually querying the raw data there, right? All right, so from there, we have the analyst then being able to connect to that data and already being able to create business dashboards and sharing that with everyone, right? But what if they have further questions? So we can have a look at this. By jumping into Tableau server. And this is the portal, the platform where you're able to navigate and to find the data that is accessible to you. So, but the important bit is, how do we make the data fast so everyone can consume it, right? So before we publish the data, share with everyone, we want to make sure that it's fast. And I want to show you what the difference actually is between using native Hive and then technologies that are more optimized for query performance. So in this case, so remember the data set that took quite a while to load? Let's try that again. And if we look at the connection here again, so we're still connecting to a Cloudera Hadoop instance, the same cluster. It's a live connection, right? And the only difference here is, if we go into the connection, within Tableau, you have the option to actually change the type, how you query the data. So we didn't change anything else. It's the same cluster, same technology, same data set. We just changed the type, how we want to query that data, right? In this case, would be Impala, but as Erwin mentioned, don't get too wound up regarding the actual technologies we're using. And we do the same query, really. So we want to look at the home runs for this data set. And you see we get an instant response, right? So that's what we want to work with in Tableau. We drag and drop fields, and we get an instant response. Let's try that again. So like this, right? So we're dragging and dropping, and we see our data and visualizing the data instantly. So then we are moving ahead, creating content for anyone to consume, and then being able to sharing that data in a way that is performant. And for an analyst, the role here is to choose the right way to query that, the right framework, the right connector. As you can see, that has a massive impact in the end experience, right? All right, so we're sharing that data now. The analyst made that available on Tableau server. And now we're moving into a state where probably we see the value of the data, we connect live to it, but maybe we want to make it even faster, right? We still have a few seconds to wait, so let's make that even faster. Let's get even more people on board with our data. So let's speed that up even further, and let's move into that fast storage layer. And Tableau gives us two secret weapons that we want to look at right now that will really help here. So the first of those secret weapons are aggregated extracts and Tableau prep. So I don't know if you've seen, done some prep sessions yesterday, or they're going to do today. It's really powerful. You have the same connectors available in terms of big data systems and creating those optimized extracts. Well, let's have a look at that. So the first one being the aggregated extract. So whenever you pull that data into memory, you can bring that data into a hyper, and that most likely will increase the performance already. But the power here is that you can aggregate the data. So you reduce the data size, you get the same results, and it's going to be vastly improved in terms of performance. And then the second is Tableau prep, right? You have your flow, you connect to your data sets, you can enrich it. Let's have a look at this live right now. So you have Tableau prep here, so that's for, what I used, for instance, to create that hot layer. You can even go further and create the warm layer or optimized code layer as well if you wanted to. But we can connect to those data sources, we can enrich it, and the important part is that you can then share that with others, right? You can then go ahead and share that on the server, and you have here now a governed flow. Everyone sees where the data is coming from, how have I changed it, and you can even run it from Tableau server itself. If you go back to secret weapon number one, the extracts, I just want to show you that you know how to create those aggregated extracts. So whenever you go up here to the data sources, so we can see all of these are live right now. If you then right-click, extract data, you're going to get this dialog. You can choose, if you create a join, you can choose between multiple tables or a single table. You can filter the data further, so you can focus on the data that you actually need. And you can aggregate the data up as well, right? So we can roll up the data based on the data dimensions or the other dimensions in our analysis. You can even hide all unused fields to make it even snappier. All right, so these are the measures that an analyst, someone in Tableau, has to already increase the performance rapidly for all the other users. So we'd say, in this way, we create data for everyone. We create that optimized data storage, data layer with Hyper in this case. Could be any other fast technology as well if you rather use that. But we want to focus on what the actual Tableau analyst can do with their data. And that way, we can reach even more people achieving that. And you probably enjoyed this yesterday in the keynote. Francois was showing you Ask Data, and that's exactly what we can use here as well, right? So we created those optimized data layers, and from here on, anyone can find that data, and we can start asking questions to it. So we can get even more people on board with the data, asking questions, querying that data, and building content from there, right? So you could create, go into web edit to analyze the data, connect to it via desktop. But let's have a look here, and let's look at all the cancel files. I actually heard that some Tableau fans who wanted to come to TC actually had issues with the cancellations to come to Berlin. So it's a major thing to look at, especially from an airline perspective. And this way, we can make this super valuable data set accessible to anyone, right? So these are the cancellations as a whole. Let's have a look at this by airline. We just select that, and anyone can just start typing, just as you've seen yesterday, creating your business and getting answers straight away, right? Based on your queries and what you want to see. So we can see here, American Airlines, they had the most cancellations, but we can always go back and change the measure as well, because actually we want to see the percentage of flights canceled rather than all the cancellations, and we can see Comair is not doing too well in our data set in the last 30 years, right? So just like that, we can answer questions on the fly very quickly, and anyone can do that. So that's what we mean by data and analytics for everyone. And that way we can get even more potential, even more value out of our data, our rich data sets from our big data systems. And the actual analysts and the data scientists, they have more time for high value work rather than creating all those reports, all those dashboards, right?
So we have those three layers. We have data sitting in the data lake. We can accelerate it by using those query accelerators. We've created these hot layers. We've created sort of those hyper extracts by doing so. Now what, right? We still need to make sure that we turn that into dashboards that are actually accessible and usable by the wide organization to give us that last 10% of the full value potential usage of our data that we've worked so hard for in creating all of these different levels. Now, before we start thinking about sort of how we expose data to our end users, it's also sort of good to think about the human scale of data, because that's a little bit different sort of, well, it's not different, it's actually the same all over life, because there's no such thing as a dashboard that has all your data on all sheets with all graph types on one dashboard. We all know those dashboards that just have a whole bunch of stuff on it, and they're not performing, and they're rendering forever, and no one gets anything out of it because they're looking for a specific thing. And that's not even how we do things in life, right? If we book a holiday, we start thinking, do I want to go for a summer trip or a winter trip? Am I going to go to Spain, or am I then going to go to Portugal? Am I then going to go to Madrid, or am I going to go to Barcelona? Right? We drill down into that information. Think about how you, well, a raise of hands, who actually, I'm going to do a newspaper analogy. Who actually reads a physical newspaper? Good. There's still a few. That's nice. But think about how you consume those, right? You get a newspaper, you grab every section that's not the sports section, and you throw it away. And then you start looking for the sport that you love, and then there's that game that you really wanted to see, and then there's that player that you really love. And then you're thinking, oh God, my stocks, and then you find the stock section again. But anyway, that's how we consume data. And the same is true for, of course, working with massive amounts of data. We have that lower level where all that granular information sits. It's sort of like reading that newspaper from letter A on page 1 to letter Z on page 100, which might be of relevance at some point, but not from the get-go. So in our data set, that's then just the lake per definition, but maybe some information by day. We then warm that up and really start aggregating things like weeks and particular routes that we might be interested in. And then we roll that up to our sort of our hot layer, where we think of things like per carrier or scorings per year. And it allows us to sort of drill down, right? We can drill down from year to carrier, maybe down to route, down to week. And then, of course, at some point, you want to drill down into that lowest level of granularity. And then also, you've taken your end user along that journey, and they know exactly where they are because they've made those selections. They've worked with that dashboard. They use that interactivity. Now, this is where we move into two extra secret weapons that Tableau can give us. And they're the cross-data-source actions, and actually the hybrid data strategy by itself enables us to do so. Because if we go back to the human scale of data, people drill down and then they find an answer, but then of course they got that answer and it brings them back up. Maybe it's not Barcelona, it might still be Madrid. Or maybe I do want to go scuba diving, or maybe I do want to go to a tapas restaurant, or maybe it is going to be San Sebastian at some point. Right? We really want to enable people to have that experience with your data as well, to really unlock that full potential. So Marius has already been building, of course, all of these data sources for me, which now allows me to start interacting with it. And then I grab a mouse, but then, of course, that's one's not connected to this. So if we look at this dashboard, we can see that we're looking at an analysis of all the flight cancellations for all those flights in the last 30 years. I can see that in this data set currently we have 167 million rows, and they relate to all of those flights that actually happened. And I can also see, they're not rendered yet, that I have some data sources that are warm and cold if I go all the way down to that route performance. Now, we were talking about that sort of that secret weapon being the cross-data-source actions. So let's just go into one of these sheets. And this is, of course, all of our cancellations. And you can see that Marius has very kindly put this data source up for me. So if I just go to data source now, we can see that this workbook actually has 3 data sources in it. I have a hot layer, remember that's that hyperfile that he created. We then have that warm layer, which is that Athena, oh sorry, no, it sits in Redshift. And then that cold layer, which is sort of that data lake, which we query with Athena. Now, how do we then build a dashboard that allows us to sort of have an interactive experience? Now, who here has used dashboard actions before? Great, okay, that's quite a few. Who hasn't? All right, so what dashboard actions will allow you to do is you select the mark in the view and they filter down into other views. And you can either switch them on by just selecting sort of the funnel icon, or we can build them manually. So let's go and look at the actions that are currently set up within this workbook. So I have my hot going into warm, my KPI, and the warm into cold. So if I look at what we're actually building here, we have an action going from your hot layer, upon a selection, drilling down into the performance per route, which is my warm layer. Now in the bottom here, I'm also defining which fields in my original sheet relate to fields in my secondary sheet. Now these are fields, of course, of 2 completely separate data sources. We haven't joined them together, we're not going to blend them together, because if we go back to what the actual true revolution that Tableau was, it's that drag and drop, and that's made possible because of VisQL. Tableau generates queries by dragging and dropping. And because we're using actions and I can select values, I can just say Tableau, if I select something that says American Airlines, grab that domain's American Airlines and put it into the query of the next data source, allowing you to use multiple data sources on a singular dashboard with, and as Marius already said, that unified experience to the end user. So if you're looking here in the bottom, we can see the target filters going from year within the column, the flight year, into target field year with flight date. So that's my primary, my secondary data source. And the same is true for unique carrier with capitals and a space, and unique carrier, just a singular word. Now the main trick of making this work sits in the middle of the screen where we say clearing the selection will exclude all values. That's why these views haven't rendered yet. We haven't initiated the actual execution of the query, because I want my end users to drill down and make decisions and be sort of inspired by the visualization. Because at the end of it, it doesn't matter that we're running a query straight directly into the data lake, because by then we've already filtered out 99.5%. So if we just go out here, and then just for the purposes, I'll start a performance recorder so we can see what's happening. So as an end user, I can just have a look, and I can see that some things are going, some are going well, some are going less well. So we have American Eagle Airlines having 5% of flights canceled. And I suddenly get that new view. And by making that selection, I go from that hyperfile straight to a query that goes directly into an Amazon Redshift. Now, if I want to sort of drill down and see what's happening here, going from another airport down, we can see that we go into that lower granularity. And unfortunately, in this case, we don't get any data back, which always happens. We see some other things. We could see 2011 or 2001 is not going too well, but let's keep things fresh and sort of like we know what happened there. But we can also just look at sort of like United Airlines. Let's have a look at 2000. They had about 5.7% of flights canceled. As a user, I can see that I have the flight to New York is not going that well. And suddenly I can see for this particular route, going from New York to O'Hare, to Chicago from White Plains, I can see the performance of United Airlines for each and every single day within the year. And by clicking onto the map, I've drilled down into the data lake directly, which to us is sort of an S3 queried by Amazon. Now, if I now stop that performance recorder, we can see why the hybrid data strategy sort of Tableau, of mingling those live connections and those data extracts are so powerful. Because by just setting up those cross-data-source filters, and we'll let Tableau actually render that workbook as well, we can see that I have a query being sent to the cold, which was the longest query. It ended up taking 6 seconds. And we can see that Tableau is running that query in Athena. But it's not 6 seconds, and because initially we had 17 seconds going straight into the lake with 80 1,000 rows, but now we're having a 6-second query going into data lake, which actually contains 170 million rows. And if we look at that warm performance, we see Tableau running that other query of another language, even though sort of we made those selections.
Yeah, this is the hybrid data strategy at play here, right? We can really leverage the technologies that we have, and Tableau takes care of writing the correct queries to the underlying data technologies.
Yeah. So basically what we're doing is we create those, because hot, warm, cold, as Marius already said, that's not a new concept. But they are, of course, very useful as we then translate that into consumable dashboards by the entire organization. We start off with the hot layer containing that sort of made for the dashboard acceleration, being high performant, using aggregations. And in our case, leverage Hyper. It's in the product for a reason and use it whenever you can. We can then just, in a dashboard, in that unified user experience, drill down into other data sources, completely unrelated. Of course, other than they are related in context, but not in any sort of formal joins. They might be live connections. They are definitely there for core report development. And in our case, that was that Amazon Redshift. It's still a data warehouse, but it's optimized for larger amounts of data because we're lowering that level, or we're deepening that level of granularity. And then that last layer is just going into the dake. It's all about cheap, fast storage, but actually with an accelerator, and in our case, that was Amazon Athena, it still is worth using and leveraging at the right time for the right use case. Because it's valuable for your data scientists from the get-go, but it can still add value to your business users if you use it in the right way.
Yeah, it's a great way to actually create engaging content, but as well have performance in mind and create a good performing dashboard, which then is more accessible and used by more people at the end. That's what we want to achieve.
Yeah. So let's just recap what we've talked about so far.
Yeah, so I think you've seen now that Tableau really enables anyone to use big data, right? So we have different roles along the way, right, making that data available, but anyone should be able to use big data and use that for their questions. So and what we've seen so far was the hybrid data strategy and engine that we can use here and combine in a smart way in order then to be able to use the right technology for the right use case, right? A data lake is great for storing data, but not the ideal thing for querying interactive queries in a very rapid pace. So we choose what is the best for which layer.
So also use that hot, warm, cold framework, and not for the sake of using it, but by making sure that you expose all of that information to the entire organization in the right way for that right person at the right time. It's still that hybrid data strategy. Think of those secret weapons. It's still, I mean, this is why it's so cool to work with Tableau. It's still our initial innovation that still empowers this product to do all of these cool things, but also thinks of some of the other elements that we've released since that really enable you to do all of these things. Think of those aggregated extracts. Think of prep, and those extracts are, of course, Hyper. That allows you to do that. And then those cross-data-source actions to maybe not join those data sources together on the data level, but just on the dashboard level. So as it says there already, it's over to you now. We feel that Tableau is great for big data, gives you all the flexibility you need, and it just comes down to using the right technology for the right use case. So I think at this stage, before we do our final notes, we promised you some time for Q&A. I feel it's time to do so.